Hello, and welcome to another episode of Awakening the Feminine Within You with your host, Miriam Bolcher. I'm excited to be here today because a huge part of feminine energy that doesn't really get talked about in this specific context is money, and how women, their relationship with money changes drastically when it comes to feminine energy, and just how they can receive more money or be pushing money away depending on the way in which they're perceiving it and the energy at which they're stepping in to money with. So I have here today with me April Wahl. She is amazing, and she and I have connected. We've known each other for a while, but never actually hung out in person. That's totally great because there's lots of people like that you just jive with that you don't necessarily get to meet in person. April, I want you to introduce yourself and your background and tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now, like with feminine energy, with coaching and all that good stuff, because your story is incredible.
Thank you. I'm so glad to finally talk and with you, and also just chat about money. That is like the whole forbidden thing to talk about. That's just it's like a disowned part of us. That's not feminine, so let's not go there. It's not from the heart and stuff. So yeah. So how did I get into this? Well, I've probably been coaching, business coaching for about 20 years or more, mostly independent contractors for most of my life. Still do it for corporate America. And at some point, I just saw that money, helping women get what they want, had a lot to do with how they receiving and going forward in their business and being able to receive. And I have a background in also yoga and meditation. And so one year I just decided to go, was after 2008, decided to go a year without money just to observe my when you pause, what's in that pause, in that space, and observe all of it and learn from it. And so I also started to find just so much about it that started to influence my dating life, actually. So then that kind of led me into being a money and a love coach. And so, I hope I got all those elements right there. Sometimes connecting the dots. So let me know if I missed anything there.
Okay, so tell us more about that year, though, that you took a pause from money. What inspired you to take that break? And what would you say the biggest difference is, when you came out of that year?
Oh, that's great questions. So what inspired it was the whole 2008 crash, right? Everyone around me was having trouble, sustaining their businesses and losing homes and jobs and things like that. And my heart broke, and it was actually a time the business that I was in did better in a recession. So it was a time when I was doing better. And for whatever reason, with my yoga, meditation practices and things like that, I was just feeling this I was feeling a solidarity, what would be the difference, if I just stopped, in solidarity with everyone else, just why don't I just stop spending and experience this year? It's not exactly the same, right? There's a choice, right? It feels I chose not to spend versus somebody else made the choice for me, but it was still a neutral circumstance not spending or not having the money or to spend. So I did that, and some of the biggest takeaways were a gathering of what was really, really, really a priority in my life. Actually, I feel my year without spending was actually one of my very best years ever. And it gave me the confidence to know that I could do anything, because I got to see how very, very little I needed to survive or be happy. And also, I just distilled to the basics. And so, if you just stuck to the basics, it wasn't a lot, but you could also be more resourceful in what you enjoyed. And I enjoyed the resourcefulness part. And then it also really set me up for, shortly after that, I ended up getting divorced. I ended up working in corporate America because of the divorce and needing insurance and stuff, but then immediately lost my job. And so I was out without benefits and a job and newly divorced for 2 years. I was unemployed. And was it hard? Sometimes, but I know that it wasn't nearly as hard as had I had not had the experience of managing my mind with my money for a whole year of not spending. It really prepared me for that. And the reason, 2 years was a while, but also I had that, the capacity to hold the emotion and not react And so I was able to really stay with what was right. I just knew that after that year without spending, there's no way that I would be in a relationship or a job that I didn't want.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is so powerful because there is so much resentment around money. But what people don't realize is that it's not the money itself. It's the resentment towards whatever prompted you to be in that situation. And then money's just like the amplifier, right? So I think that's so powerful that you voluntarily chose to, in a way, not heal, but like handle emotionally that type of relationship with money, which nor under any other circumstance had it been prompted by an outside, source, which it was for you a couple years later. But because you voluntarily chose that, you were able to have a safe relationship with money in a realm that would normally be perceived as being negative, right? Mm-hmm. So that really gave you an incredible, I'm like, oh, that is so interesting, because I've been in that position, but I was forced into it, and I had to, and many times, but I've had to, it wasn't until, so many times past it, I was like, okay, there's more to this than the resentment towards the money. Like there has to be a deeper healing that's happening here. So I think that your background and relationship with money, that is just so incredible that call it intuition or inspiration of the universe, whatever, prompted you to make that decision to enter into that relationship with money. Because the only way I can see it is you had the upper hand because you saw that money being a restriction is not a derogatory thing, right? Like you saw that first and foremost, and that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I felt like what it got to happen was I got to break some automatic conditioning and patterns and attachment with money and then reset it to what I wanted it to be. So yeah, a lot of freedom.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's and that's why I love having this conversation, because exactly as you mentioned, first thing that, that you said is just, money is so intimate, and people have such a hot and cold, almost like abusive relationship with it, but they don't really realize that that's what's happening, is this tug of war mentality that's going back and forth, and it's not sustainable. So when you help people with money and you're talking to women about money, how do you help people open up and get used to the idea that money is not trying to get out to get you? You know what I mean? Money's not coming at your throat and trying to choke you out. It's always something else that's behind. Money's just the facade, right? Money's just the face of it, but it's something else. So how do you open up women to the idea that money in and of itself is not bad, and that money doesn't have the capacity or the energy to just be negative?
Right. Oh my gosh, I love this question so much too, because I love the way that you said it, because a lot of people they're not acknowledging that they're projecting onto their money that it's coming to get them and it's gonna chastise them and things like that. So one of the things that I do, and this is where I think the feminine energy and intuition comes in with money, because women tend to be very relationship oriented, and so like you said, it's hot and cold. So they're opting out to not have a relationship with it. So in relationships, you hear about attachment styles, like anxious attachment styles or avoidant attachment styles. What I ultimately came to learn is that the relationship we have with money is our attachment style. And so I remember one day looking at my money a long time ago, and I was just just looking at my budget or whatever, and the way I could feel myself, you feel it in your body, right? Feel myself, ignoring my money. I was like, man, if we were in a relationship, this would not be a good relationship. This just would not be going anywhere. It's not being nurtured. It's not going to grow. We're not how do you feel in a relationship when you're not working towards your dreams? It's it's dead. And so I basically, and that's where it was sort of born, that's where I have this idea when I coach women, is that I say, if money were your life partner, what would it say to you today? And it opens up that part of us that we, or some people can say the spirit of your money. I'm going to talk to the spirit of my money. What's its name? You're going to sit and make it enjoyable. Like if you were going on a date, you might have, a glass of wine, listen to some music, or a coffee or whatever it is that you enjoy, but enjoy being with your money. That's actually one of the things I heard money say to me one day, just said, I just really want you to enjoy having me, enjoy spending me, and enjoy being with me. And if you think about a loving life partner that just really loves and adores you, that's actually what they would say to you. And so you get the opportunity to grow with your money that way and really listen to it and hear what it wants for you. And you start to learn the properties of money itself, like money. And you talked about it being neutral. And it is. It's paper. And what it is it flows through our society. It's called cash flow for a reason. It flows. And we make it flow with the energy that's behind it, either gratitude or desire. We can magnetize it towards us. We can send it away with a lot of abundance and joy. It moves. It's very feminine. It's very flowy.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So when you because you just said, right now, money is very feminine and it's very and I mean, I think the best, when I think about that in that context, I'm like, yeah, of course it would be feminine. It flows. It's, it has that flexibility and that neutrality that comes with it. And, a couple episodes ago, I did a deep dive, into feminine energy and what it is. And so for those that haven't listened to that, that's episode 2. But feminine energy is that ability to just, there's no that push-pull energy anymore. And so, being able to just come and approach your relationship with money with just, what's the best way? I'm trying to think of the best analogy to explain that in, because it's just kind of like a dating relationship. You don't come up with your walls up, you know what I mean? And you're not I'm going to tell you what to do, and blah, points 1 through 5, this is how the relationship needs to be right? There's no expectation. Mm-hmm. You're just hopeful and excited because you want to experience something great. And sure, you have parameters that you want to follow, but it's that is kind of how I see the relationship with money. But from your context, when you say it that way of money being feminine, expand on that more.
And also, if you're talking about there's not enough money, right? If you're always saying every day there's not enough money, I will just say to somebody, if that were your life partner and every morning it greeted you and said, you're not enough for me today, how would you feel?
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah. So it's going into feeling, because I think the thing is about money, what we project onto money in our culture is, one is we really want a sense of security and freedom. So security, stability, freedom, and there's empowerment. So a lot of us associate people with money, power, politicians and things like that. So, but in our culture, our feminine power, a lot of us are really disowned from our feminine power. And so in a way, if we can get in touch with those feminine properties with money and own that power, that's a way to do it. Having a conversation with it, right? You're not gonna, suddenly you'd probably put up some kind of a boundary with somebody talking to you you're not worthy or you're not enough for me every day. And, you might nurture that a little bit more. So, and in some ways too, I also think that the one thing I love about money is actually, I think that it is, it can be, since it's neutral, it can be, and we can have these conversations with it and get to know it. It actually has masculine and feminine properties with it. I think it's a nice balance, which I really love. There's a lot of wholeness there. But also we attract what we're being. So if we're not creating a sense of security and freedom and abundance, we're within ourselves, we're not going to be projecting that on our money or attracting it. And you talked about having a date. I like to think about money as, or dreams that money supports, right? The feminine part of it is feeling it in our body, because the masculine is very logical and solution focused, and the feminine side is, and they can work together really well, is feeling it. And so many of us women are just cut off from our feelings, especially with money. It's all about math. That's what we learned in school. And I used to teach my little sister all the time, the biggest skill that they never taught us is like, how do you feel? Like, we used to just go window shopping for the day. This is our little practice. And it's like, okay, we have money with us and we can spend it and we know we can, but let's just make a day where we just practice going around and just getting whatever we want. But how does it feel to us? Does it feel like it's so exciting, like it's an 8, 9, or a 10? Or is it just like a 3 or 4? How much of our conditioning and rules say, well, I should get this, or it's scarcity. Well, they're on sale. I need to buy a bunch of them. And you don't even want them, So like really feeling what you want is the feminine energy. And then I like to think of it as an invitation. Whereas I think about if I were to have a dinner party with my closest friends, because you mentioned the intimacy, right? You want it to be so nice. You know that you might pick up a fun game. You might have good music playing. You might light candles, whatever you want to do to set the ambience there, but you're going to set the table and it's going to be a nice experience. And that's what I think of when I prepare for money, bringing in money. I don't think of earning money. I think of attracting money. Earning is a lot of, it's a very hustly, it's very, I think nothing good comes from force. It's a force. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So many amazing points. So true on the balance of the masculine and the feminine, right? Because money, you're supposed to receive it and you're supposed to give it. And that's the masculine and the feminine coming in, right? Like the masculine is the giving and the donating and, that willingness to like help other people. And the feminine is being willing to be open and receiving. So you talked about a lot of points there about, like that feeling aspect of it and like desire and want and love that what you said about, earning and just being kind of open to allowing. I think earning also comes too with the fact that you have to be you have to be good enough in order to have money, but there's absolutely nothing to that, right? Like feminine energy is just at your core, you're good enough as it is, right? Like you don't need anything else. You don't need, type of clothes. You don't need education. You don't need whatever. Like you're just inherently good as is. So how come you just can't have what you desire and that feeling that you talked about, of being able to sit with? How come you just can't have that, right? And being able to challenge that relationship, and that in essence is feminine energy. So when it comes to women being able to open themselves up to receiving more, it sounds like it's, kind of a multifaceted healing process, because first of all, you have to be able to feel, right? You have to be able to know what you want and what you desire. And then second of all, you have to pivot and change your relationship and how you think and feel about money. And if it is currently, in an abusive state, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, awareness is the first step in healing anything. And so changing their relationship with money and opening themselves up to their own inner feminine and their own desires, and thinking about the fact that by getting into a state of receivership, they could have more money. How would you guide women to open themselves up more to that? Because, and I mean, I'm sure as you've probably experienced, and I've experienced this too, like the thought of number one, being good enough, and number two, that money could just come to me feels very unnerving and very like, well, why would I want that? Because that feels like I'm not going to be in control. So how do you, what do you tell women who are, their first reaction to this is like, psh, no, she's got to be, like, how do you help women?
Yeah, and you nailed it. That is you nailed it. That is their first reaction. So a lot of times, so what I like to do is meet them where they are. Because again, nothing good comes from force. And so we just, I start with like meeting them where they are in their body. Like, so whatever they're telling me, I'll say, well, what does that feel like in your body when you tell me that, where is it? And if that part could speak to you, what would it say to you? So they're getting in touch with something somatically, because, and the thing of it is money is very, like in our brain and in our body, it's very tied to survival. It's very tied to a fight or flight. And so it's going to bring up a lot of stuff like that. And I often find that, with money issues comes a background of likely the fear around it is there's probably been some kind of an emotional manipulation. So those emotions are going to be hard to get in touch with, because Those are the things that we've held down so far, so nobody could manipulate it, right? So what we do is I work on, first of all, creating a sense of trust in their body, and then trusting themselves more. And a lot of that also comes with, again, somatic processing, recognizing what we're telling ourselves. I teach them to really have their own back. Because if you've got you like no one's got you, like money's going to just be tight with you, like tight. It's going to come in and support you that same way. And so we do that. Another thing I do is I teach a lot of nervous system regulation, central nervous system regulation, because that really is our capacity to have. And if you have a background with some of that emotional abuse and things like that, one of the things that happens in our brain that we get wired for, and I know this is my background too. I had an abusive childhood, and some of us have it to varying degrees. But a lot of emotionally immature parents or different variations, or even culturally, right? Socially, there's, things that happen to us. But I know that in my own brain and a lot of people I work with, those neurons that fire together get wired together. And I know in my background, in my situation that, there was abuse by my parents. And so there's fear and love wired together. So when you think of like good things like money coming to you, there's also this like, fear, and I can't let it in. So it's a practice of us really. I have a daily, like a money protocol I do. It's not a budget, but it really helps people get into it really helps them get in touch with all these feelings, and it gets in touch with, and then we learn how to regulate our nervous system. And the more we learn to regulate our emotions, one of the vastly underrated skills of money management is learning to manage your emotions. And that's what we do. And really get in touch with desire, because once you really regulate your emotions and really get in touch with your desire, like that's what money's for. It's going to launch it for you. It's really beautiful.
It's so exciting because like when you talked about, the somatic exercises and nervous system regulation, I mean, I think that as women in today's society, it's almost like the culture has built us in to try and be as robotic as possible, right? Like you go, you hustle, you do. And then it's almost like there's no connection to self at all. And so it's at least my experience was, in the beginning, learning all these things about myself. I mean, it was such a roller coaster because all of a sudden you're opening up the door to be able to feel, and then you feel a little neurotic because you're like, whoa, I'm crying all the time. Then I might feel depressed. Then I feel excited. And it's like this cycle all over again. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, first of all, we've been trapping these emotions for how long, right? And not allowing ourselves to truly feel and be seen and heard by ourselves. And then to open up that door, and that's where the nervous system regulation is so, like, I think nervous system regulation, like that's what should be taught in schools, to be quite frank, is like, can you imagine?
That's what I say too. Yeah.
Can you imagine how sane and like how many conversations we would be able to have with each other, that are normally pretty difficult, but would just be, just like easy to have because we would be able to feel like calm and serene and just, able to process everything. So I love that you brought that up because it is so essential. And then I think too, like when it comes to the, you said a lot of things in like one sentence, and it was like, okay, nervous system regulation, and then desire, and then, money wants to be with you. And it's like, oh my gosh, the thought of even money wanting to be with you can feel, I mean, at least for me in the beginning, when I started this journey, it felt very unnerving. Like someone would want to be with me. And it would want to be with me all the time. And a lot of it, right? Like a lot of it would want to be with me at one time. Like it was
adore you. Like,
right. And it seems so strange, but then it's also like, but that's how a relationship should be, right? Like going into, and I'm sure, you have this would probably be another topic for another day, but like, just that balance of masculine and feminine energy when it comes to dating, right? There are so many similarities, and I see why you do the money and the dating, because I mean, they cross over. They feel like they're two sides of the same coin almost. Okay, so say a woman is like, okay, yes, I really want to do this. I really want to see myself. I want to open myself up to receiving money more. And say they want to start the process by, coming to terms with their emotions and learning to process them. What type of nervous system regulation tips, if you have any, would you, and at what step? Okay, so let's talk about like all the different things that we have mentioned. So say they want to heal their relationship with money and they want to heal and start healing, their nervous system. What kind of resources or what order would you recommend them doing that in?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so interesting because, again, I really try to meet them where they are. So it's going to be different for everybody. But if they really want to practice, I say the money protocol that I do, which is it's kind of a mini version of my year without spending, in which I have them decide ahead of time for 24 hours, what would you like to spend? And so because we're so removed from the connecting the dots, spending, buying, desire, how do I want it, right? So there's just this, I actually call it a treasure map. So they can go they have their 24 hours and they can go through it. But I also have them at the same time during that day check off what was pleasurable to them. So, and that's kind of a trick because while they're focusing on their money and I have them daily write about what's pleasurable to them, the nervous system cannot be in fight or flight at the same time it's thinking and processing pleasure. So we're rewiring the brain to break apart that fear and love together and really just get into the pleasure. And what you focus on expands. And so the more that we focus on pleasure and getting into that space while we're still doing some of the work, it doesn't become a binary either or. And so we start to learn and process that, there are good and bad feelings that can exist together. Because that's how we go through life, right? We sort of think of our emotions or our situation, like you said, the roller coaster. Oh, that makes me feel like this. Don't do that. Do more of this. And it's well, we don't really. It's not whole the way I'd say the tail's wagging the dog. We want to be able to go through life and let the tail wag because we're happy going through the center, right? Not have the tail wagging and flipping us all the way around side to side. So, and it's a 24-hour process. We do it every 24 hours. And, some people will talk about it out loud and mention it sometimes in my group, but most of people are still pretty quiet about it and want it to be their journey, which I respect. It can be a solo journey too, whatever you want, till you feel like you want to talk about it. But that's where I start. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. So there were two other things that I thought of that I was I think, in relationship to money, I think is such there are things that I think come up more often than not. I know for me, budgeting was so annoying. I think because I always had a bad relationship with budgeting in general. Budgeting always felt restrictive, right? It felt like I was being suffocated. And it just was because when you tie in desire and tie in opening yourself up more to your feminine, opening yourself up to receiving, it's and then also trying to heal, childhood trauma. I mean, when I was younger, I was never allowed to get anything, right? My mom was always no, you shouldn't want anything. And then, that led me to believe my desires are bad and all this stuff. So until I discovered that budgeting, to a point there where I reached out to a friend and I was I feel like we need a more feminine energy perspective of budgeting instead of all this bro formulas, this is, percentages and blah, 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 blah. And it's money is just so unique and so personal to each and every single person. It feels money should be a thumbprint, right? It's just okay, you get your own formula and that's your own formula. It doesn't have to be the same for everyone else's. So,
right.
How do you tell people about budgeting and what do you, suggest in that realm? Women who are maybe feeling confused or lost with budgeting and are just oh, I love it, but I hate it at the same time. How do you heal that part of it? And how do you kind of because for me now, I'm obsessed with paying my bills. I love paying my bills. I literally get so giddy. I get excited every time I get paid. I'm oh my gosh, I'm gonna pay bills. I just get so excited about it. And I love budgeting now, but it was a process. And and I also don't feel I have to budget. I'm okay, I'll use it when I need it. And then, if it's not needed, great, whatever, go from there. But what are your thoughts around budgeting when it comes to feminine energy?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I think it's really said. And you're really well said. And you're right. The people that really are into their money love the budgeting. And you may not even, but you may have more of a feminine energy about the numbers. So what I find is that before healing, we make the numbers mean all these things about us. And it's usually a projection of how we felt about our authority figures because you mentioned, you weren't allowed to want. So a lot of what we have with our money issues is we're not in touch with our own authority. And it's exactly like you said. That's what I say. Your budget is unique as your own fingerprint. So this protocol that I do have them reset every 24 hours, planning what they're spending their money on. It's just getting them in touch with their own authority is all it is. And then you would make the call. Like, I don't actually teach people how to budget or what to do. And I know for some that can be like, oh, well, I really am still looking for somebody to tell me what to do. But, like I said, you get to know yourself so well and your own authority that you just know what to do to budget, and it's different for everyone. And I go through different phases myself still, so that is feminine too, because feminine, you're going to be rooted in liquidity. You're going to be able to change on a dime. So, I don't believe in that feeling of force. And I feel like my money is, when I feel like I'm forced and I'll have a conversation with my money, it just says, you don't need to force it. I'm going to be here. If you want to budget and play with me, you can. Just like you're thinking, you love it and you can't wait to be in it. But you also know that you don't have to.
Exactly.
If you don't want to, right? There's no pressure. There's no attachment there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. I love that so much. And I love that, what you said too about, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want a formula, and a formula is going to be what fixes me. But feminine energy is the complete opposite of formulas, right? There is no structure. And that's the beauty of it, is that it's kind of like a tree root. It's just expands and grows in different directions. And it's, and sometimes it's above ground, sometimes it's below ground. It's just it is what it is. But if you were to trap it, it would not survive, right? It wouldn't do well. And so when you think of that context, at least for me, I'm like, wow, I could be that flourishing if I just allowed myself room and wiggle space to just learn and discover myself and figure out what makes me me. And having that foundation, like you mentioned, when you have that security of knowing your own desire and who you are and what you want, and having the flexibility to change on a dime, that is another level of freedom. And then taking that extension into money, that's where the power comes in. So that brings me to the whole, to our title about receiving more money.
It's trust.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's trust. And you don't need a formula for trust.
Right.
So, and also, side note, like you mentioned about the desire thing, women in our culture are taught to be desired. They are not taught or encouraged to pursue their desires. So there's a lot of working in the beginning trust.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't say I have a formula per se. I just do the protocol because, trust is not a formula, and neither is desire. So the protocol will help flesh that stuff out. And that's why it's not a formula or a budget. And it's a protocol that they get to design. And again, that's something that is very nerve-wracking for people, because they want me to tell them the protocol but it's your money. You get to decide.
Yeah.
And and they're so sure, that's not going to work. And it does.
Yep. Well, that's just it. I mean, I think what bothered me when I first learned about feminine energy was, everyone was like, oh, openness and trust. And I'm like, that literally doesn't make any sense. That was what I was thinking when I first discovered feminine energy. I'm like, what do you mean? You keep making it sound so simple. And I just remember getting so frustrated in the beginning. And then now on the other side of things, I'm like, oh, but it is so simple. And I think that's what gets women, is it's we've been taught that it's oh, we have to, break the glass ceiling and do this and this and this and change and, push. And it's oh, but less is more. Less is totally more. And it's the more simplistic you can make it, and the more you just, remove the facades and remove the beliefs that we've inherited from, generations and society and, all this stuff. It's more comes to you. Literally, more comes to you, because you're blossoming from the inside out. And it's okay, let's just remove all the structures, right? remove everything that's just not serving you. And trust me, that is way more work than it sounds, but it is worth the work, right?
And we have this idea that we already have this belief that money is hard, and we forget that that's a belief we have. And so without facing it, we keep repeating the pattern of making it hard. And then, and so we don't actually get to learn that actually money is easy. What if it were easy? And with the trust thing, right? If you get to that place where you're trusting, the question is, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? at some point, the game turns from being a win-lose, because that's what I think a lot of people approach money with. It's like this hard white knuckle. I gotta win. I cannot lose money. I cannot be a failure. And there's all this pressure, and it's a win or lose game, and it's very stressful. And at some point with that trust, you know that you can't lose. You know that you can only win or learn. And so it becomes easy to take big risks and then it becomes easy. And like, if you said this to me years ago, I probably wouldn't even like take it in. And one of the big things I think is huge is that we don't realize growing up in our culture how, masculine we are taught to be in the corporate America or in business and like how to do things. And we're very defensive. If you're playing a win or a lose game, you've got offense and defense. And so one of the things that can be really hard for women is that oftentimes defense just becomes our way of being, and we don't even know that we're defensive. And so in order to receive money, to receive love, to receive learning, we've got to stop being defensive. I was talking with a few women just a bit ago, and we talked about like, how come like I was in a relationship for 8 years, be it with money or whatever, and it's like I just couldn't take in the learning. And one of our common denominators was, it's like when we stopped being defensive, we were able to take in and we were able to integrate.
Yeah, it's that safety mechanism, right? It's almost like we're taught we're not good enough. So therefore we need to build these walls. We need to go and do to either learn and make yourself into something that's worthy of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And then you have to build a wall. You build the wall around yourself. You keep, secure. You keep everyone out. Exactly like what you were saying in it. And, from my coaching and from what I've seen from my clients, like it just leads to frustration, right? They're just so frustrated and they're like, I've been doing this for how many years, and it's just not sustainable. Then health problems, then depression, then just like more anxiety to the point where it's like, is this just going to be my life now? Right. And it's like, yes, to be vulnerable is absolutely terrifying, but there's also power in vulnerability. I mean, if anybody who's read anything, any of Brene Brown's work, like that vulnerability, again, like it's all pieces to this incredible feminine energy puzzle that is nothing but power. And so to get there, the road just looks very different than what we've been trained, as you've been saying, culturally and by our families and society. Yeah. Get there, right? It just looks very different. So just flipping that conversation on its head and being like, okay, well, what if we were to just look at things differently, right? And that starts with, people who are listening to this podcast here. So going back to that power, though, that comes with feminine energy and the vulnerability and simplicity and everything, when people think about having more with feminine energy, having more of, can be anything, but in this specific context, like having more money, what would you say to people that are like, that's just not possible? Like, how could being more open, being more vulnerable, being more simple lead me to having more money?
Well, if I'm going to be in feminine energy, I wouldn't be trying to convince them. I would let them be there.
I love that answer.
Oh my gosh. You're an example. Like, I mean, that's just it. And that's the thing I think about living in our patriarch culture. It's like, that's just it. There's like one way to do it. But when you're such in trust, you just say it and you believe it.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so one thing about feminine energy for, the listeners, and hopefully you have, listened to the other previous episodes and definitely go back and give a listen. But like a huge part of that feminine energy and the receiving is attracting and just letting everything that you need and everything that you want come to you. And that's, I love that you just responded that way, because you're like, okay, well, it's just a matter of, that person's, when they're willing to hear and they're ready to hear, they'll hear it, and they'll hear it from where they need to hear it from. But it's kind of like, if you're in this state of push, and you're just like, well, the math needs to math, then that's coming from a state of masculine energy, and you're looking for a solution, but it's not like, the key to feminine energy is like being open to whatever. So being open to whatever means that the answer might come to you in a way that you might not expect. which is also the beauty of it.
Yeah. Love it.
I love it.
And so just to reiterate what you're saying, feminine energy is being. So we model it like we be in belief. And I wouldn't want to fight where they are. But what I would say to somebody, if that's where they were, is, I'd meet them where they are. And I would say, well, do you want to believe that it is easy? Because if they're coming to coaching, they probably do.
Yeah.
And then I would say, what would you want that to look like? If you believed that, how would you feel? And let's step into that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Oh, I love that so much. Amazing. Okay. Well, this has been such an incredible discussion about, this is exactly what I wanted it to be, which is, talking about feminine energy and money and just the intricacies of it. So tell us, for those out there listening, what you do, what kind of services you offer, and your info and how people can connect with you.
Yeah. So I am actually a Mermaid Love and Money Coach, and the mermaid is symbolism for feminine energy, which is intuition, creativity, and rebirth. So we can create those beliefs, which is why I said, what would you want to believe? What would that feel like? The feeling is going to be the intuitive parts in the body. We can feel our ways there. So I help women in particular, sometimes men, but women in particular, use their feminine energy, their mermaid spirits, to believe in the unbelievable, live the life they've imagined. And with Love and Money, Mermaid Love and Money Coach, and for money, we go from worry to worthy, and then I help them create the loving world they've always wanted to live in. And the mermaid is also representative of giving up our energy, our feminine energy, to be part of this world. As in, like, remember in the Little Mermaid story, she gives up being her voice. She gives up her voice. She gives up her magic, being a mermaid, to live on land. And so what I do is I help mermaid spirits find their voice, discover their joy, and embrace their magic.
That is so beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Okay, so where can people find you or connect with you?
You can look me up on Facebook or Instagram, April Wahl, Mermaid Love and Money Coach. And if any of this stuff resonates, you're welcome to sign up to get emails. And I have a great virtual assistant who delivers gold from Mermaid Cove. And so lots of fun nuggets in there to just make it a joyful journey. The more fun you have, the more money you make.
That's exactly it. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. Amazing. Well, that's all we have for today. And thank you so much for listening and or watching, if you're on YouTube, today's episode with April Wahl, Receiving More Money with Feminine Energy. It has been truly an honor to be able to share this information with you. Money is such an integral part of our day-to-day living. And I know that for me, healing my relationship with money through feminine energy is really what got me to where I wanted to be with bills, with budgeting, with all of that stuff. And it is truly, truly so powerful. I hope that you felt that way as well. If you are a woman who is looking for more, you want less of things that you don't want in your life, anxiety, frustration, feeling like you're being choked by either your job or your life or just everything that's going on with it, and you want more peace, more joy, you want to be able to just live in the present moment and be like, I have the best life ever, even if you're feeling sick or under the weather, and you are just wanting more openness, more money, maybe a better job or a better business, and you want to fall in love with yourself and you want to fall in love with life, you've come to the right place. My business, and I help women through feminine energy coaching. And what that is there's multiple methods in which we do it. There's group, there's one-on-one, and there's also calls and courses and things that you can take on your own. But the most important thing is I help women show up and open themselves to the world of feminine energy. If that is something that you're interested in, come and check out miriambulcher.com/awaken the feminine within. You can seek other coaching things around my website, and definitely join our Facebook group, which is The Intuitive Women. Come and share what you've learned today. What kind of takeaways did you have from today's podcast? I would love to hear it. And part of feminine energy is supporting other women and feeling supported in return. So start that with that and do that in our Facebook group. We would love to see you, support you, allow you a safe space to feel seen and heard, and come and share there. It would be amazing. Facebook.com/theintuitivewoman. We'll see you there. And if you've loved this podcast episode, share it with a friend. Please rate it. And if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, and also subscribe on any other platforms that you may be listening on. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you in the next episode.